Hi everyone! I've been really looking forward to making this video for some time because it combines two things which really interest me, i.e. property and also stock markets, which in my case is going to be my pension. More and more people are turning to property as a form of investment income when they retire and choosing this over a pension. And this is even after the government has tightened the tax rules on, say, buy-to-let landlords and investment property. So in this video, we're going to have a look at the pros and cons of property versus pensions, which is a proxy to looking at stock markets as well. I'm Anthony, and as always, we're talking money. So the first thing to look at is the investment performance of these two asset classes. Property, not surprisingly, has beaten inflation quite comfortably since 1955 by on average 3% per year. This really is quite significant. Just think that whatever happens to inflation, your investment beats it by 3%, meaning that your real wealth increases by this amount, while cash, or the pound in your pocket, loses money every year. Now, pensions, which really should be a proxy to the stock market performance, since most pensions are heavily invested in the stock market, have beaten inflation by approximately 6%. On the face of it, stock market investments wins hands down here, but we're not taking into account some things like annual transaction fees, which may affect the overall total somewhat. But the takeaway point here is that both asset classes should beat inflation over the long term. Now, long term really depends on you. If you're near retirement, long term could actually be 5 years, whereas if you're just starting out, long term is probably more like 40 years. But the longer the term, the better the chances are that these two asset classes will perform favourably for you. However, asset appreciation is only part of the story. The other part of total return is the income from these assets, namely rental income for property and dividends for shares. Here, property wins with an average yield of 5.9%, while shares give a prospective yield of 4.3%. Of course, there is a fluctuation within these figures too. Rental yields in London are significantly lower than, say, rental properties in the north of the country, and also some shares yield a lot less than others, and a lot more than 4.3%, but as I say, these are averages. The next factor to take into account is tax. This is an area that's bedeviled by the detail, but on the face of it, there are three types of tax to take into account. First of all, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, and income tax. Property, other than the one that you live in, is subject to all these three taxes, and the government has really concentrated in this area, reducing the expenses that you can claim against the income, and say the mortgage itself, just to name one. But also increased stamp duty, which is another tax, and now you have the prospect that incorporating your property empire may not avoid some of the taxes that this method was once designed to escape. Inheritance tax at 40% and a special capital gains tax, which essentially means that if you sell a property, you're going to be paying 28% capital gains tax. Either way, it all adds up to the message that the government doesn't like property as an investment vehicle, which to me is a little bit odd. After all, property means that fewer people are reliant on the state to provide a major source of income, and also landlords do provide living accommodation to millions of people. If landlords are the cause of house price inflation, then the government are just as culpable by introducing schemes that encourage demand, e.g. help to buy, stamp duty holidays, etc., and limit supply by making it punitively expensive to sell. Anyway, that's a different topic and I could waffle on about that for ages. So, okay, pensions on the other hand are treated very differently for tax. No tax is paid on contributions. In fact, importantly, any contributions are deducted before the calculation of income tax, thereby reducing the tax you pay on your income. This means that if you've paid into your private pension fund out of your tax salary, the government gives you that tax back. Many people, mainly pension sellers, say that this amounts to the government topping up your pension with your marginal rate of tax. I've always found this to be a bit of a false explanation personally, since it's a bit rich for the government to claim that they're giving you money back to you that was yours in the first place before they took it off you in the form of income tax, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, I digress. The gain in the value of pension pot is tax-free, just as the gain in property value is tax-free. The interesting part is that when you start to take money out of your pension or out of property. With pensions, you're allowed to take 25% of your final pot tax-free once you've reached the grand old age of 55, although this is increasing to 57 from 2028. The remainder can provide you an income via annuity that is taxed at your marginal income tax rate. The government does now allow people to take more than 25% of the pot, in fact 100% from the pot, but the extra gain is taxed at the marginal rate again. It just depends on whether you think you can do better than the annuity rates on offer, which is probably a fair question to ask these days. Property can be passed on to whoever you like, whereas pensions may die with you or pass on to your beneficiaries depending on when you die, on what it is your pension pot and what is in your pension pot and how the terms of your pension are written. This is a very complex area, and in this part of the video I have to say that if you need pension advice, don't take it from me or anyone on the internet. Talk to a proper financial advisor who is qualified on pension law and advice. Okay, so now we come to the practicalities of both. Property is not hassle-free. It's not a hassle-free passive form of income. You can take it from me, absolutely guaranteed this is not hassle-free. I know from personal experience, having had quite a few properties in Southampton, that hardly a week goes by when you don't have some sort of issue to sort out. Finding tenants, sorting out maintenance issues, rental defaults, void periods, noise issues, just to name a few. And don't ever underestimate the hassle it is when you need to kick a tenant out who refuses to pay the rent. The law is heavily on the side of the tenant here, and the only way to get them evicted legally is through a rather expensive court case. We had one case where a tenant stopped paying, and in court one of his mitigating circumstances was that the door was stiff to open. The judge threw out the case and ordered him to leave, but time is money and we lost 4 months of valuable rent. Pensions, on the other hand, are almost pay in and leave it. I say nearly because if you watch my other video on pensions, my pensions, it tells you that you need to keep an eye, since not all pension performances live up to expectations. In my case, the experts looking after my pension have done no better than keeping up with inflation, which is roughly half as good as sticking my money into an index tracker. Hopeless to say the least, because these people are meant to be professionals. Okay, so what's next? With property, there is literally no limit to how many properties you have. No limit as to how much you want to borrow, other than the normal bank's affordability criteria. No limit on when you buy or sell. Pensions, on the other hand, there are 2 limits you have to be very aware of. Firstly, the age before which you cannot even access your money, currently 55, but as I say, this is increasing to 57 in 2028. And the second limit is how much you can have in your pension pot. The limit is currently £1.0731 million, and this is the size of the pot you're allowed, over which you start to pay a punitive tax rate of 55% on any contribution into the pot. This tax is so high that it makes no sense at all to pay into a pension once you've reached this limit. This includes personal pensions, company pensions, SIPs and SASs. It all contributes to that total figure of 1.7 million. For some of you, this may seem so high that it will seem an impossible target to get to, but others it's a very real problem, especially if you're a higher earner. But before you think that this sum is very high, then remember that after you've taken your 25% tax-free, you're left with approximately 750,000, which if you put into an annuity today, this would give you a gross income of about £35,000, or after tax about 28,000. This therefore is probably the maximum income you can expect to get from your fully maxed out pension. This figure will be considerably less if you want joint life, or more importantly, if you want any kind of inflation proofing built in. Currently, some annuities are only paying about 2.8% if your pension grows by 3% annually. This translates to a 21,000 gross or £16,800 net income, assuming you have used your personal allowances elsewhere. Although this sum will grow by 3% a year, and remember 3% may not even be enough to beat inflation, this is what you're going to get with the maximum pension pot. And if you think this is good, fine. But if you've had a job and you reach the £1 million limit, then the prospect of living on £28,000 or £16,800 or less is not great. So what are the alternatives? Pensions, on their own, do come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You can, if you're lucky, get final salary pensions that will clearly give you more if you're earning more, but these are becoming increasingly rare and probably only in the public sector now. There are also self-invested pension or personal pension schemes, or SIPs, although these are still subject to the maximum pot I mentioned earlier. You can invest in more or less anything into a SIP or SAS, which is another form of pension, including property. Indeed, I know someone who's bought the freehold of a Tesco store and a couple of restaurants in a SAS and will pay handsomely in retirement. Certainly much better than the current annuity rates. If you want property but no hassle, then real estate investment trusts, or REITs, may well be worth a look at. They are legally bound to return 90% to shareholders, and 75% of the fund must be invested in property. They invest in things like supermarkets, shopping centres, tower blocks, offices, etc. etc. My personal favourite is the individual savings accounts, especially the self-select share ISAs. There is currently no limit to how much you can pay into an ISA. Essentially, you are building your own investment portfolio, free from capital gains tax and income taxes, but not free from inheritance tax, and contributions into ISAs are made out of taxed income. This latter point, and the fact that ISA income is tax-free, are the main differences between ISAs and pensions. Retirement income is a thorny issue and definitely worth speaking to a proper financial advisor. Personally, I like property as an investment. That said, I sold all of mine a few years ago as we relocated away from the south coast, but I might be tempted to dip my toe back in at some stage. In the meantime, I do hold money in real estate, investment trusts and ISAs. I don't personally hold money or a lot of money in a pension, since my personal pension experience has not been very good. I am old enough to remember the debacle over Equitable Life, and indeed my own pension underperforming terribly makes me a little bit wary of that side of things. But that's just me, that's just my personal experience. But everyone is different. Let me know what you're doing for your retirement income, and give me your experiences, good and bad, of whatever you've invested in. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm Anthony, and as always, we're talking money. Until the next video, bye for now.